Hi, my name is Charles Meyer. I'm so happy you're watching this video because it's very important to me that I share the information I've begun to learn. Again, I'm so happy you're listening to this. Today I'm going to be covering Second Chance by Robert Kiyosaki. This book came out in January and I flew through it. So let's jump right in. First are three themes: past, present, and future. Robert Kiyosaki says that in the past, up to this point, there's been a GRUNCH, gross universal cash heist, in which our wealth is being stolen via taxes, inflations, and savings, which we'll get into later. Robert Kiyosaki predicts that in the future, there's going to be an economic depression. He says specifically in 2016 this will happen. He precedes that prediction with a successful one, that he said there would be a crash prior to the major one, which happened in 2007. If you want to learn more about his prediction, go ahead and check out Rich Dad Prophecy. Before we totally begin, let's look at a few vocabulary words. The first is emergency. If we look at emergency, we can see the word emerge. Whenever there's an emergency, like the one that's coming when we go into a financial emergency, a state of emergency, something new will emerge. Robert Kiyosaki says while he is a bit worried, he's very excited for the biggest power shift that's coming in all times. We have to be able to identify what emerges so we can move with it. To do that, we have to begin our education. Within education, we see educia. Educia literally means to draw out. Just by watching this video and furthering your education, you're drawing out a better future. We must educate ourselves so that we can find the true emergence in the emergency. Next is asset and liability. Assets generate income. Liabilities create expenses. Cash flow is the movement of our money. The way I like to think of it is, an asset is a cash flow that creates income, and a liability is cash flow that creates an outcome. Money in, money out. Next is capital gain. Capital gain is what people do when they buy stocks, sell stocks, flip a house. It's a type of income, but it's the second highest taxed. So while we know what it is, and it is a good way of creating an income, it's not the best. We have to know what it is before we can avoid it. Last is wealth. Wealth is your ability to sustain yourself with no cash flow. If you had no income, how long could you survive? Let's get into it. Robert Kiyosaki says that a picture is worth 1,000 words, so I'll stick with that. What we see here is the Dow Jones Industrial Average. We're here at this endpoint. Kiyosaki says that we can continue to go up, stay where we are, or fall down. Make note of this small bump that we see here. On the same chart, we see that that small bump was the giant crash of 1929, which caused a 25-long-year period known as the Great Depression. So imagine if this small thing created this long period, imagine what this monstrous mountain would do when it collapses, and be assured that it will. To shift gears, rather than a Great Depression, imagine a Great Inflation. That's exactly what happened in Germany. A millionaire in 1923 was broke 5 years later. Here we see a man sweeping money into the sewers because it's worthless. It took 1 trillion German marks to equal 1 mark. All of this happened in a 5-year period. Here is where we are, the biggest money printing of all time. We've begun following the German model of hyperinflation. It's important to know this because we've seen in the past what happens when governments and banks follow that path. and that's exactly where we're headed. The purchasing power of the US dollar has fallen from $1 to 5 cents in 100 years. That's 95%. It won't take another 100 years to lose the next 5%. So we have to begin to educate ourselves to find a way out and see what emerges. Going to school to become a high-paid individual is very risky. One, student loan debt has risen by 360%. Kiyosaki says plainly, this is not what you want to see for student loan debt. People who declare bankruptcy rarely get pardoned for this debt. It has an increasing interest for the remainder of your life. If you do have to get involved, please do it wisely. Furthering that point, the average earnings of young college grads is falling. So to pay for your debt, you're receiving less and less money to do so. Now let's say you become a doctor or a lawyer, or you've just graduated today. So now you don't have to deal with any more debt, and you have this high earning income. Well, the top 20% end up paying the most in taxes. Yet the top 1% and top 2 to 5% pay very little. Why is that? This is the cash flow quadrant. E stands for employee, S stands for self-employed, those who are at the top 20%, usually. Doctors, lawyers, and things of that nature. They pay 60% of their labor in taxes. Employees pay the second highest, 40%. But on the right side of the quadrant, we see that businesses and investors pay 20% and 0% respectively. That's because if somebody invests millions of dollars into mining, fishing, or oil, the government is saying, thank you. We want you to do that, so we'll tax you very much less. That was the past. Let's see the present. This is your financial report card. As I said, assets always create an income, liabilities always create an outcome, or expenses. What you need to do today, or in the very near future, is identify where you fall in all of this. Fill out the chart and see where you are. Cut loose old liabilities and begin investing in building your asset column so you can create a higher income. Not only higher, but healthier. So some might say, okay, I'm keeping my money in my bank, I'm saving, I'm investing in a mutual fund, 401k, or my Social Security. All of those are tricks. Again, the grunge is working to steal our wealth via taxes and inflation and savings. We see that your $10 in savings is an asset. It's a $10 liability to the bank. Their liability will always become an expense, and in this case there's an interest for you. So that $10 asset creates an income, and that seems good. The problem is, your $10 savings, their $10 liability, becomes a $100 asset. This is known as the fractional reserve system. The bank can dole out in multiples what you have in the bank. This is where the inflation and money printing comes from. The more money you have in savings, the more money they can print out. Imagine it this way. If a pond becomes still or stagnant, microbes will grow. It'll get moldy. All the life in the area in that pond will die. The same thing happens if we park our money in the bank. Our money and the US money will die. We have to get our money out and move in a hyperdrive so that we can generate assets and build our income even more, rather than keeping it still. Now, I want to talk about 3 types of income. The 3 types of income are ordinary. That's linear income. If you work for 8 hours, you'll get paid for those 8 hours. That's the worst form of income. The second is portfolio, capital gain. If you want to know more about portfolio income, look up the book, The Millionaire Next Door. It's an old book, but it explains the concept well. It will generate income, but it's the second highest taxed. The third is passive income, true income. This is money that keeps coming in over time, whether you're working or not. It comes from assets. This is the type of income you desperately want and need. Following that, there's 3 types of wealth. The first is tertiary wealth. As we saw in Germany, a millionaire became worthless because they only had tertiary wealth. Tertiary wealth is paper wealth. We have to move that tertiary wealth and translate it to primary and secondary wealth. Secondary wealth is production wealth. If I can produce food and give it to people, I'll become wealthy. Now imagine if you own the resource that the land is on. That's primary wealth. Primary wealth is resource wealth. So to summarize, Robert Kiyosaki says that in the future, there's going to be a global economic depression. In the past, up to this point, there's been a gross economic cash heist, in which our money around the world is being stolen via taxes, inflation, and savings. It's our job to begin an education to raise our financial IQ so that we can draw out the better future. So that way, when there's an emergency, we can see the new that emerges. The past was wrong. Define your present and build a better future by creating assets. Move from the E and S, left side of the quadrant, to B and I, right side. And then transfer that tertiary wealth and translate it into primary and secondary wealth. Thank you. I hope you pass this information along.